Good evening and welcome to another LTV production. I perhaps should begin by introducing myself. My name is Father Pat Scanlan, and it's quite a number of years since I was last on LTV, so it's nice to be back again and to say greetings to all who are tuning in tonight. We're coming to you this evening from the Blarney Park Hotel at the end of a very wonderful conference on maybe an unusual topic. The title of the conference was Reaching Out to Those Hurt by the Experience of Abortion. And I'm joined this evening by the keynote speakers from that conference. Here on my left, Teresa Burke and her husband Kevin, both from the United States. And on my right, Bernadette Goulding, who lives in Cork City, native of County Clare, who is the director of the Rachel's Vineyard movement in Ireland and the United Kingdom. So, to begin, I might turn to you, Bernadette. Bernadette herself had the experience of abortion, so perhaps we'd ask you, Bernadette, maybe to share a little bit of your story with us.
Yes, indeed, I'd be very happy to do that. I had an abortion myself many years ago and know the pain and the shame and the grief that follows. I suppose my pressure for my abortion was the fear of shaming my family. You know, the fear of letting them down and all sorts of fears, you know, which is the main motivation for abortion, I think, for women are so scared, so frightened. So it's a good number of years ago, but I still remember very vividly that experience. I was alone, I was frightened, I was living in London. As I said, the fear of shaming my family, perhaps the fear of never being able to return home again, because many childhood experiences of women who'd, you know, become pregnant out of wedlock and were shunned by their own families. So I was living in London and I suppose a little bit lost and probably came from a sheltered background in many ways, very strict parents, that when I eventually got to London, I was, you know, this newfound freedom was new to me. And I suppose I got somewhat lost and got involved with someone and became pregnant. And of course, my immediate reaction was total fear. And I suppose that I'd never be able to return home again. So I had no concept of, I suppose, of life within my womb at that time. It was this problem I had. So I became very sick because I was continuously sick. And I eventually ended up in a hospital in London. Where abortion was introduced to me by a young house doctor who said to me, you know, it's not a big problem, we can terminate your pregnancy. So I was absolutely thrilled with this in a sense because I thought this is a way out of my problem. So he explained it to me. The procedure was very simple. We can do a termination and you'll be fine afterwards. So that was the beginning, really, I suppose, of the lies of abortion. And I said yes, and my abortion took place and my baby's life was taken. So maybe, I suppose, that began the horror story afterwards, you know, the pain, the suffering, the shame, the nightmares, the trip. So that's just the beginning. You know, what I thought was my pregnancy was a problem, all it did really was create a much bigger problem, a life problem for me.
Bernadette, thank you for sharing so openly and so honestly with us. Perhaps if we move on, can you recall how soon after the abortion did all of these negative consequences and negative feelings begin to surface?
I suppose they began immediately because I remember I woke up in the hospital after the abortion and I was screaming. And there were 3 nurses holding me down on the bed. I was literally screaming hysterically. I suppose maybe in some part of my subconscious, the reality of what had occurred was somehow had impacted on me. I realized something terrible had happened. And I didn't know at that time that I was actually experiencing what is now called post-abortion trauma. I was a different person. I changed. My personality changed. I became fearful. I remember coming out of the hospital, I couldn't sleep. I was having nightmares. But I didn't associate that with the abortion. You know, somehow or other, I began to get, you know, stay in bed all day and come out only at night. I thought everybody knew what I'd done, that there was a big A in my forehead, you know. the nightmares are horrendous. In this dream, there was a recurring dream of a baby falling, and the baby was always just out of my reach, and I would be reaching out to catch this little baby, but I would wake up without having achieved that. So the nightmares, the couldn't sleep properly, I wasn't eating properly. I was just so filled with fear, and I honestly I didn't put it down to the abortion as such at that time, because, I mean, I barely knew before the abortion that abortion existed. To me, it was just a word that I'd heard, you know. So it was horrible, the fear. And I remember going to confession maybe a couple of months afterwards, because the guilt I felt was just unbelievable. And going to confession to the priest and confessing, and the priest telling me, you know, you're forgiven. But for a moment, I felt relief, but very soon after, the feelings would come back again. How could you be forgiven for such a terrible thing? So this was a repetition, something I repeated all of the time, going back to confession, going over it and over it again, but getting no relief from it, you know.
Thank you, Bernadette. We will come back to you again in maybe later. But I would now like to move to Teresa Burke here on my left. And Teresa, of course, as I mentioned, is from the States, the founder of Rachel's Vineyard Movement, which, of course, steps in to help, if you like, where Bernadette has left off, to bring healing to those who have been hurt by that experience. So, Teresa, perhaps you might share with us a little how Rachel's Vineyard got started and how you got inspired to do so.
Well, I was actually first became aware of the problem when I was in graduate school studying psychology, and I was assigned to lead a support group for eating disorders, addictions of anorexia nervosa and bulimia. And the subject of abortion came up one night in our group, and it was like a bomb going off. A woman shared about nightmares and flashbacks that she was having related to her abortion. She shared that her husband would call and leave messages on her answering machine calling her a murderer. And this subject being brought up just tipped this reaction. One woman said that she had an abortion too, and it would just kill her if someone kept reminding her about it. And another woman got up and started cursing and swearing, and she said, we have a right to control our bodies, and having an abortion is the best thing I ever did. And she cursed out anyone who should try to make her feel bad about it. And another woman got up out of the room and left, and we could actually hear her car screeching out of the parking lot. So it was like a bomb going off, and I saw it was a huge emotional issue that everybody really was having trouble talking about. And then I went to my supervisor of the psychology group, and I told him what happened. And he said, you have no business prying into people's abortions. He said abortion is a private, personal thing, and I was instructed not to bring it up. So I could clearly see that there are people suffering out there, like the woman who complained of her flashbacks and nightmares, and that they need our support and help. I saw that for other people, the subject is so painful. They have to withdraw from the conversation. They can't even stand to hear the word. But that indicates unresolved issues. And of course, as a psychologist, it's those kinds of issues that fester and create a lot of symptoms that you've talked about. It certainly creates anxiety and depression. It fuels addictive behaviors, the abuse of drug and alcohols, and it can also impact our ability to experience intimacy and joy in relationships, because there's been a wound, a really serious wound in relationship.
Thank you, Teresa, very much. And maybe now we'll move to Kevin, Teresa's husband, who is also deeply immersed in the Rachel's Vineyard movement. And Kevin takes a particular interest in the effect that abortion has on men. And maybe that's an area of this whole issue that's maybe not often aired, not often mentioned. So Kevin, maybe just share a little bit with us about how abortion can affect men.
Well, first, I would say that there's a misconception often that men are involved in abortion, or they have feelings or reactions to their involvement in abortion. In 95% of the decisions that a woman makes to abort, in those cases, he's involved in that decision. He has a powerful role to play. Sometimes he may be silent and do nothing to defend the child and to try to dissuade her from that decision. She's afraid. Sometimes in his fear, he just kind of pushes her towards that decision. And then she's often left alone to face, as Bernadette shared, the consequences of that. And in Teresa's book, Forbidden Grief, you see the psychology of abortion, but you also hear many stories of women's experience. So oftentimes, unfortunately, men's role in abortion is one where they abandon her in various ways. They coerce, they manipulate. And this deeply wounds them as well, because they're called, regardless of the circumstances, they're called to fatherhood at that time. A child has been conceived, and in their hearts, they know that they've been called to fatherhood, but they don't listen to that. They deny it in their fear and their weakness, and sometimes because they're wounded as men. They have wounds with their own fathers, and they're afraid to embrace fatherhood. And so this wounds their fatherhood in ways that they probably don't even realize in their relationships, because they have been intimately involved in a death event. And if you look at some of the stats of interviews of men involved in abortion decisions, upwards to 80% are aware that this was a child. A third of these men or more are thinking about the child that might have been born. So, that means that they're also going to be at risk for some of the same symptoms that women experience, but they're going to be even more hidden because men aren't supposed to hurt after this. Some men will marry a woman who has had an abortion in her past. And abortion, regardless of whether one or both parties in a marriage have had a previous abortion, it affects their intimacy. It affects their communication, their trust, their bonding. And if those issues are affected, if there's pain there and problems, then that affects family life. It affects their ability to parent. So men are very much in need of abortion. Even when they've been involved in a negative way in the abortion decision, they need to face that, not deny that. And in that humility will come healing. And then the Lord will redeem their manhood and their fatherhood, which is so important. So we're calling men as much as women. We're not condemning. We're calling them, no matter what their role in abortion is, to healing.
Thank you, Kevin. That's such a reassuring message, isn't it, for men and women who have been hurt by this experience. So I'm going to turn to Teresa again, because as the founder of Rachel's Vineyard, Teresa, you've been involved obviously in many, many, many weekends, presumably in all over the States and outside of it. How effective are the weekends? And if I put the difficult question, does it last? Does the effect last?
Well, we're talking about the weekends for healing after abortion, which were developed after I learned that abortion was such a traumatic experience that needed more than, sometimes as Bernadette shared, many confessions, that you really needed a process to be able to go back and examine how the abortion impacted your life, and then grieve it, and then receive spiritual as well as psychological and emotional healing. And the weekends are extremely effective. We've done surveys and outcome studies, and it continues to grow because it's being spread by the people who've been helped by it. So we know the program's good and the demand, and I think in the last 8 years we've grown to 17 countries. So that's because it's effective, and people want to share the healing that they experience. Bernadette had a very powerful experience in Rachel's Vineyard, and as a result of that, she bought it. She wanted to bring it and offer it here in Ireland and help spread it in Europe.
Thank you, Teresa. Maybe another question along those same lines. Do the majority of women who've had abortions suffer deeply, or is it just a minority who have other maybe predisposing psychological issues? How common is, if you like, the pain, the suffering that we're speaking about?
Well, there's a very large continuum of post-abortion reactions, and some women know right away. Bernadette gave us a good example. The minute it was over, she knew, and she was grieving and feeling terrible. Other people seem to tolerate the procedure okay, but then something like post-traumatic stress disorder, where a period of time or years, even decade may go by, where they simply stuff memories and feelings related to abortion because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it as a society. You don't tell your friends. Abortion is a carefully guarded secret, and because you don't process those feelings, they can lead to symptoms, and sometimes those symptoms may take years to appear. And what happens is that events in the life, perhaps the birth of a wanted child, will trigger memories and feelings related to abortion. And a lot of people will realize the first time they see a sonogram, and they'll remember, or the first time their infant is placed in their arms, they'll remember. And so this time of birthing or deciding to have children can be wrought with tremendous anxiety, fears, depression, and even suicide. The rates of suicide are 550% increase in suicide risk following abortion. Just the different, that's extreme, that's high. So I don't think that we can say we know exactly how many women suffer, but women and men suffer in different ways, and they might be okay for a while, and then something will trigger memories and feelings, and it can be extremely debilitating and very frightening because you don't know what's wrong. And a lot of women feel the despair that I must be going crazy because they don't know what's making them feel so horrible. Those memories have been so deeply repressed and cut off from who they are as mothers and women and partners.
Thank you, Teresa. I've no doubt that looking in tonight, there must surely be some people who are perhaps being deeply touched by what they're hearing and are maybe feeling a bit scared and a bit frightened and maybe wondering, gosh, should I take the risk of going on such a weekend? And then would I be able to take that risk? So if I could just come back to you again, Teresa, supposing some such man or woman is watching tonight and thinking, maybe I go on that weekend, what can they expect? How will they be treated? What kind of experience awaits them?
Well, they would be met with a tremendous amount of respect and compassion. The goal of any Rachel's Vineyard retreat team, and they would be met by a very kind and loving, caring team, which includes men and women who've suffered the loss of a child through abortion, just like you may have. And so there isn't any judgment, there isn't any condemnation. Our desire in going back, we don't go back to be hurt by the memories, we go back to be freed by them so that you can move on in your life in joy and hope, in love, and in more fulfilling relationships that don't bear the burden, the grief, and the shame. So it's a very beautiful weekend for psychological and spiritual healing, because we also, through the weekend, experience the mercy, the compassion, and the love of God, who wants to heal. That's the good news. God forgives anything we've done, no matter what it is, whether it's an abortion or some other thing. The Lord wants your wholeness. He wants your healing. That's why He came. That's the good news.
Can I add to that, Father, that we're certainly welcome on the retreats grandparents who may have been involved. Either they were not able to stop an abortion, or perhaps they encouraged it. Oftentimes out of love for their child, they're trying to protect them, and their child's hurting afterwards, and they've lost a grandchild. They're welcome to come, and they're welcome to come with their son or daughter. Siblings of aborted child, if you know that you've lost a sibling through abortion, or one of your sister or brother, you have a niece or nephew that's been lost to abortion, you're welcome to come and experience healing and grieve the loss of that child. And again, couples are welcome. We encourage them because the abortion affects couples intimately. They go through the healing process together. It's a very powerful experience of healing, and it really redeems and renews their relationship. One party may not be post-abortive. You're still welcome to accompany your spouse. Many fathers will spiritually adopt the child that their wife had perhaps aborted, and vice versa. That's a very beautiful healing to couples and families.
Thank you, Kevin. And I suppose if I could just add that, just from my own experience of being involved in a number of weekends, I suppose I would put it like this, that every woman and every man who comes, they're treated like princesses and princes. They're treated with incredible dignity, and irrespective of where they're at, they're respected at that point, and is in total confidentiality. Bernadette, if I could come back to you, you will recall Bernadette shared with us a few moments ago her own experience of abortion, but that from that dreadful, painful experience, it led her on to reaching out to help others who've had a similar experience. And of course, she is now the director of this movement, Rachel's Vineyard, for Ireland and the United Kingdom. So Bernadette, if I put it to you that maybe tonight somebody is watching this programme and maybe they're a bit scared, a bit frightened because they've had some such experience as man or woman, is there one word that you might just like to say to them?
I suppose I know that you'll be frightened, anybody out there who's watching who's had an abortion, but to know that you're going to be talking to someone who's been through that experience. I've been there, I know your pain, I've thought your thoughts, I've felt your feelings. You'll be coming to an emotionally safe environment where we'll love you and accept you where you're at, where you can share your story in complete confidence. As Father said, some of my team are post-abortive who've been through the healing retreat and are now working alongside me. It's in total confidentiality, as I say. You can call our number, which we'll be giving you in a moment. The location for our retreats is known only to those participating. So for anyone out there who's afraid, don't be afraid, because we're there to help. We're there to give you a new hope in your heart. So I just say, just make that call. And also, I'd like to say that there's a wonderful book which Dr. Teresa Burke has written. It's called Forbidden Grief. And it might be a gentle introduction to you to read through that and read the experiences of other men and women who've been through the same trauma as we have. Also, Kevin Burke has written a wonderful book, Redeeming a Father's Heart, which is all about men and abortion. And I know there are many men out there who are hurting deeply. Perhaps that might be an introduction to you to read through that and read some of the stories. And that will give you some confidence and some, give you some background on it. So make that call. And I will be able to give you information how you can get that book, and please God, I hope to have those books myself, a supply of them that you can get from me at whenever you need them.
Yeah. Thank you, Bernadette. And before we end the programme, we will of course give you Bernadette's telephone number and the website address if you wish to make contact with her.
Also the US website.
And the US website.
Yeah.
Also, if you wish to order Teresa's beautiful book, Forbidden Grief. Bernadette, maybe for you another question.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's now 4.5, almost. How many years is it since
October 2003?
Yes,
the first retreat.
That's right. My maths were never great. So that's what, almost 4 years, is it?
Yeah.
Almost 4 years since Rachel's Vineyard came to Ireland.
Yeah.
You've participated in numerous weekends. I've been with you on a number of them.
Mm-hmm.
What results have you seen? What have you seen? What has it done for women and men?
I have seen amazing results. The stories I hear are just incredible. Like the texts I get on my mobile phone. I only got one. I got an email 2 days ago, and I probably won't be able to remember, but there was a beautiful depiction of a little monkey trying to reach up and get some bananas from a tree, and he couldn't reach the bananas. And he was sitting there crying, and you could see the tears in this little monkey. And suddenly this great big elephant comes along. And what the lady said was, we women are that monkey. We're crying because we're so wounded and so damaged. And you are that elephant. And in the end, the picture is the little monkey is sitting on the elephant's back with a great big bunch of bananas. So I don't like to be likened to an elephant, but that was the analogy of this young lady that she sent me the email, More women say, oh, you must have wings under your jacket. I only got another one of those yesterday. So the peace and the healing that comes on those weekends, and initially there's such fear, I can only say it's just amazing. It's a miracle. It's like every weekend without fail, a woman will say to me, you've given me a new hope. So it's just a powerful experience. You have to experience the weekend. And what I say is try and, feel the fear and do it anyway. Just come, make that call and experience that weekend. I've seen the transformation taking place in women's lives. It's just amazing. I can't tell you. And women, men, grandparents have come to me and write to me all of the time, telling me the peace that they found in their hearts. So for anyone out there who's hurting, I say, don't be afraid. Just make that call, because there is hope, there is healing, there is life after abortion, And we can make that connection with our God and with our child and find peace in our hearts again, and know that, that suffering that you've endured for so long, it's not going to be wasted. It can be used for good, because, look at me. I'm a clear example. If somebody had said to me a few years ago, I'd be sitting here where I am today, I'd have told them they were crazy, because there's no way I would have sat and spoken like I'm doing if it weren't through the power of God, that I can sit here and have that courage to speak out, because I've been so healed and I have so much peace in my heart. And, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Teresa Burke and her husband Kevin, who have Irish roots, by the way, you'll be very happy to hear. And I'd like them to share that very briefly. That they're coming and bringing this wonderful message of hope and healing to our country, because I know in my heart for sure, because my heart's on fire since they've come, This is all, it's part of a bigger plan that we have no concept of, that they're here spreading this wonderful movement in this country, that their ancestors left this country years ago, and now their children have come back, to bring this message of hope and healing to our Irish people and to English, to all over Europe, in fact. So maybe you'd like to share with us about your Irish connection.
Why not?
I'm not going to sing. Well, my relatives are from County Mayo, Burke and Walsh, and unfortunately the connections and the details are rather scant, so I don't. Okay. I know it's County Mayo, but in my heart, to come to this country where my roots are, and really just my father's mother and my father's father came over to Philadelphia from County Mayo. And so it's not that long ago, so I feel like these are fresh roots, and to come back and return to this place where my faith and my cultural and my blood roots are has been very powerful for me, just personally, but also to be working with Bernadette and all the people that came from across Ireland and to share the message of hope and healing. What a privilege for me. What a blessing. It's hard for me to put it into words how deeply I've been touched to be here. And we train all over the world. Honestly, I'm saying to you that this has been the most joy-filled experience of training. The people that we met involved in Rachel's Vineyard here in Ireland, it's just powerful, wonderful, beautiful people. It's just great hearts, such a great spirit in our conference the last few days. So thank you for having us here.
Thank
so
you
wonderful.
for being here.
And thank you for all the dance lessons we had in Irish music. We were dancing past midnight. And
I'm glad that's not on film.
as Kevin said, that the Irish have so much joy, and we've been blessed to experience that. And my family is from Limerick. Actually, my relatives I met were in Croom, and I visited them many years ago and met 10 red-headed cousins and saw my grandfather's homestead with a thatched roof. So it's just wonderful to be back after so many years, because I was here when I was probably 20 years old. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time I've been back, and we're just really happy to be bringing Rachel's Vineyard with us and happy to see it being planted so firmly in the soil, and I know it'll grow and bear much fruit here.
So, Teresa and Kevin, thank you very, very much indeed. And indeed
thank you, Father.
To our director for Ireland and England as well, here on my right. So we thank you all, and maybe just in concluding, just to maybe on behalf of all of us, to say a special thanks on behalf of the people who were here over the weekend. I think we may have mentioned there was close on 200 people participated, therapists, counsellors, doctors, people from the caring professions, clergy and so on. So on behalf of all of them, we want to say thanks as well.
Our international guests.
And indeed some international guests as well. So we thank them. Now, in concluding, maybe just for the benefit of anybody who would like to find out a little bit more about Rachel's Vineyard, if you would like to contact Bernadette as the director, her telephone number 087 859 2877. 087 859 2877. And if you wish to contact me, also feel very free, as I've also been involved, thankfully, and it's been a great experience with this wonderful movement. The website, www.rachelsvineyard.ie, and then the American website, .org, where you can get much more information. So again, we thank you all very sincerely for joining in tonight. If some of what has been shared this evening has maybe triggered some pain or some hurt, don't be afraid of it. Maybe it might be the opportunity, the key to, at this point, maybe you're now ready to reach out for the help and the healing that is available. And certainly we have seen it happening so many times through Rachel's Vineyard. So don't be afraid to contact any one of us in the strictest of confidence. And we can certainly vouch for that. And as Bernadette said, the weekends are held at venues that are never disclosed beforehand except to the participants. So good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.